The desert sun beat down mercilessly on Forward Operating Base Sentinel, a collection of prefabricated buildings and reinforced bunkers carved into the harsh terrain of eastern Afghanistan. The temperature hovered around 110 degrees Fahrenheit, and the air shimmered with heat waves that made the distant mountains appear to dance on the horizon. Inside the main barracks, the afternoon lull had settled over the compound like a heavy blanket. Lieutenant Sarah Atlas Brennan stood, at exactly 6 feet 4 inches tall, a towering figure even among the predominantly male population of Navy SEALs stationed at the base. Her shoulders were broad, her frame muscular in a way that spoke of countless hours of training that went beyond standard military requirements. At 28 years old, she had spent the last 6 years proving herself in a world that still questioned whether women belonged in special operations. She sat alone in the corner of the mess hall, methodically eating her lunch while pretending not to notice the glances and whispers that followed her everywhere. 2 tables over, a group of Marines were engaged in their usual afternoon banter, their voices carrying across the room with deliberate volume. "I'm telling you, man, it's not natural," Corporal Jake Davidson said, leaning back in his chair with exaggerated casualness. "A woman that size, there's got to be something wrong with her. Growth hormones or some shit." His buddy, Lance Corporal Marcus Chun, snickered. "Maybe she's got that giant disease. What's it called? Gigantism. Whatever it is, it's freaky as hell. You seen the way she walks? Like a damn robot. No grace, no femininity. Just this monster in uniform." The words carried across the mess hall, and Sarah's jaw tightened imperceptibly. She took another bite of her sandwich, chewing slowly, mechanically. This was nothing new. She had heard variations of these comments her entire life. In high school, where she had towered over both her female classmates and most of the boys. In college, where her basketball scholarship had been both a blessing and a source of constant scrutiny. And especially here in the military, where being different was often treated as being deficient. Staff Sergeant Tom Rodriguez, one of the few people at the base who treated her with consistent respect, approached her table. He was a compact man, barely 5'8", with weathered features that spoke of multiple combat deployments. He set his tray down across from her, without asking permission. "Don't let those idiots get to you," he said quietly, his Boston accent thick and comforting. "They're just intimidated." Sarah looked up, her gray eyes steady and unreadable. "I stopped caring what they think a long time ago, Sergeant." "Bullshit," Rodriguez said, but there was no malice in his tone. "You care? You just hide it better than most." He took a bite of his meal, then continued. "You know what your problem is, Brennan? You're too damn good at your job. These guys can't handle that a woman, especially one who looks like she could bench press their entire squad, can outshoot them, outrun them, and outthink in the field." Sarah allowed herself a small smile. "Is that supposed to make me feel better?" "No. It's supposed to remind you why you're here. You didn't join the SEALs to make friends. You joined because you're the best, and you know it." Before Sarah could respond, the loudspeaker crackled to life. "All personnel, report to Briefing Room Alpha immediately. This is not a drill. I repeat, this is not a drill." The mess hall erupted into motion. Sarah was on her feet instantly, her long legs carrying her toward the exit in powerful strides. Whatever was coming, she was ready. She had trained for this her entire career. The moment when all the ridicule, all the doubt, all the sneering comments would fade away in the face of actual combat. The briefing room was packed with bodies. The air conditioning struggling against the combined heat of 50 soldiers crammed into a space designed for 30. Captain James Morrison stood at the front, his expression grim. Behind him, a large screen displayed satellite imagery of a village about 20 clicks northeast of their position. "Listen up," Morrison began, his voice cutting to the murmur of conversation. "We've received credible intelligence that a high-value target, Taliban Commander Abdul Rashid, is holed up in the village of Karwar. This is the same bastard responsible for the IED attacks that killed 6 of our people last month." The room went silent. Everyone remembered those attacks. Sarah had helped load the body bags onto the transport helicopter, her face expressionless even as her heart had raged at the senseless waste. Morrison continued, "We're sending in 2 teams. Alpha team will approach from the north, Bravo team from the south. The objective is to capture Rashid alive if possible. But if he resists, you're authorized to use lethal force. Rules of engagement are standard. Positive ID required before firing. Minimize civilian casualties. He paused, his eyes scanning the room. Brennan, you're with Bravo team. Rodriguez is team leader. Sarah felt a familiar flutter of adrenaline in her chest, but her face remained impassive. Around her, she could hear the whispers starting again, feel the skeptical glances. Christ, they're putting a giant on the team? Someone muttered. Probably just for show. Diversity quota bullshit. Rodriguez turned around, his face hard. You got something to say, Davidson? Corporal Davidson had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. No, Staff Sergeant. Just wondering about team composition. Well, stop wondering and start preparing. We roll out in 30 minutes. Full combat load. This is going to be a hot zone, so make sure your gear is squared away. The briefing dissolved into controlled chaos as soldiers dispersed to gather their equipment. Sarah made her way to the armory, her mind already running through the mission parameters. She had trained for village clearing operations countless times, both in simulation and in actual combat. The key was to move fast, stay alert, and trust your teammates. The problem was that most of her teammates didn't trust her. In the locker room, Sarah methodically prepared her gear. She checked her M4 carbine, ensuring the action was smooth and the magazine seated properly. She strapped on her body armor, adjusted her helmet, and secured her sidearm. Every movement was precise, practiced, automatic. Lance Corporal Amy Martinez, one of the few other women in the Special Operations Unit, appeared beside her. She was petite, barely 5'2", and had faced her own share of discrimination, though of a different kind. Hey, Atlas, Martinez said, using Sarah's call sign. You good? Sarah nodded. Always. Those assholes in the mess hall don't know what they're talking about. You're the best operator here, and everyone who's actually been in the field with you knows it. Thanks, Martinez. Sarah's voice was quiet but sincere. It was rare to receive genuine support, and she appreciated it when it came. Just be careful out there, okay? I've got a bad feeling about this one. Sarah met her eyes. I'm always careful. But if things go sideways, I'll do what needs to be done. 30 minutes later, 3 Humvees rolled out of the base gate, kicking up clouds of dust that hung in the still air like a brown fog. Sarah sat in the back of the second vehicle, her rifle held at the ready, her eyes scanning the landscape for threats. The terrain was brutal, rocky, barren, and offering countless hiding spots for insurgents. The village of Karwar appeared on the horizon after 40 minutes of hard driving. It was a typical Afghan settlement. Mud brick buildings clustered around a central square, narrow alleyways between structures, and the ever-present danger of IEDs buried in the roads. The vehicle stopped half a click out, and the teams dismounted. Rodriguez gathered Bravo team around him. 6 operators, including Sarah, all armed to the teeth and ready for combat. Remember your training, Rodriguez said, his voice low but intense. We go in fast, we clear systematically, and we watch each other's backs. Atlas, you're on point with me. Davidson, Chun, you've got our 6. Martinez, Williams, you're covering our flanks. Davidson opened his mouth as if to protest Sarah being on point, but a sharp look from Rodriguez silenced him. They moved toward the village in a tactical formation, weapons up, senses heightened. The afternoon sun was beginning its descent, casting long shadows that made every doorway a potential ambush point. Sarah's heart rate was elevated but controlled. This was what she had trained for. This was where all the mockery and doubt became irrelevant. They were 50 meters from the first building when the world exploded into chaos. The ambush was perfectly executed. Machine gun fire erupted from multiple positions simultaneously. Rooftops, windows, the narrow alleyways between buildings. Bullets tore through the air with a sound like angry hornets, kicking up dirt and rock fragments. Contact! Multiple hostiles. Rodriguez's voice cut through the chaos on the radio. Bravo team, find cover. Alpha team, we're taking fire from all sides. Sarah dropped to one knee behind a low wall, her rifle coming up to her shoulder in one smooth motion. She identified a muzzle flash from a second-story window and squeezed off 3 control bursts. The firing from that position ceased. "We're pinned down." Davidson shouted from somewhere behind her. "We need to fall back." "Negative," Rodriguez responded. We pushed forward. "Brennan, on me." Sarah was already moving, her long legs carrying her in a low crouch toward the next cover position. Bullets whipped past her head, close enough that she could feel the displacement of air. She dove behind a burned-out vehicle, Rodriguez landing beside her a second later. "This is a clusterfuck," Rodriguez panted. They knew we were coming. Before Sarah could respond, a massive explosion rocked the street. A rocket-propelled grenade had struck one of the Humvees, sending a fireball mushrooming into the sky. The screams that followed were immediate and terrible. "Man down! Man down!" The cry came from Corporal Chin. "Davidson's hit. He's trapped in the vehicle." Sarah's head snapped toward the burning Humvee. Through the smoke and flames, she could see Davidson slumped in the driver's seat, blood streaming down his face. The vehicle was already engulfing in flames, and it would be only seconds before the fuel tank exploded. "Brennan, no!" Rodriguez grabbed her arm, but she was already moving. Everything seemed to slow down as Sarah sprinted toward the burning vehicle. She could hear Rodriguez shouting behind her, could hear the crack of enemy fire intensifying as the insurgents realized what she was doing, could feel the heat from the flames growing more intense with each step. She reached the Humvee and wrenched open the door. The metal was already hot enough to burn through her gloves, but she ignored the pain. Davidson was barely conscious, his body armor torn apart by shrapnel, blood soaking his uniform. "I got you," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. "I got you." She reached in and grabbed Davidson by his vest, pulling him out of the vehicle with a strength that seemed impossible. He was a solid 200 pounds of muscle and equipment, but she lifted him like he weighed nothing, draping him across her shoulders in a fireman's carry. The enemy fire intensified. Bullets sparked off the Humvee's chassis. Somewhere close by, another explosion sent debris raining down around them. Sarah turned and began running back toward cover, her legs pumping, her lungs burning from the smoke and exertion. Davidson groaned in pain with each jarring step, but Sarah didn't slow down. She couldn't. If she stopped, they both died. The rest of Bravo team provided covering fire, their rifles chattering in disciplined bursts. Sarah could see Rodriguez standing exposed, emptying magazine after magazine toward the enemy positions to keep them suppressed. She was 10 meters from safety when she felt the impact. The bullet caught her in the left shoulder, spinning her partially around. For a moment, she thought she would fall, would drop Davidson, and doom them both. But something deeper than training, something primal and fierce, kept her on her feet. Sarah gritted her teeth and kept running. Blood was flowing freely from her shoulder, warm and sticky inside her uniform. But her legs didn't stop moving. 5 meters. 3 meters. She crashed into cover behind a thick stone wall, carefully lowering Davidson to the ground. Martinez was there immediately, her medic kit already open. "Jesus Christ, Brennan." Martinez's hands were already working on Davidson's wounds. "You're hit." "I'm fine," Sarah gasped, though her shoulder was screaming in agony. "Take care of him." Rodriguez appeared beside her, his face a mixture of awe and fury. "That was the stupidest, bravest thing I've ever seen. You could have been killed." Sarah didn't respond. She was already back at her rifle, providing covering fire while Martinez worked to stabilize Davidson. The battle raged on around them, but something had shifted. The rest of Bravo team was fighting with a renewed intensity, inspired by what they had just witnessed. It took another 20 minutes of intense combat before air support arrived, a pair of Apache helicopters that made short work of the remaining insurgent positions. By the time the medevac helicopter touched down to evacuate the wounded, the battle was over. Sarah sat with her back against a wall, her shoulder properly bandaged by Martinez, watching as they loaded Davidson onto the helicopter. He was unconscious, but alive. He would make it. Chin approached her hesitantly. He looked young and shaken, his face smudged with dirt and gunpowder residue. "Lieutenant Brennan, I just wanted to say, what you did back there, I've never seen anything like it. You saved his life. You saved Davidson's life. Sarah looked up at him, her gray eyes tired but steady. That's what we do, Chun. We don't leave anyone behind. I know, but... He struggled for words. I'm sorry for the things we said, the things we called you. You're not a monster. You're a goddamn hero. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, I'm not a hero. I'm just a SEAL doing my job. Same as you. Same as everyone here. But as she sat there, watching her team gather their gear and prepare for the ride back to base, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Not pride, exactly. Not vindication. Just a quiet sense that maybe, finally, she had proven something that shouldn't have needed proving in the first place. She was exactly where she belonged. The medevac helicopter touched down at forward operating base Sentinel just as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that seemed almost obscene given the violence of the afternoon. Sarah sat in the back of the helicopter, her wounded shoulder throbbing with each beat of her heart, watching as the medical team rushed to unload Corporal Davidson. His face was pale beneath the oxygen mask, but his vital signs had stabilized during the flight. The base hospital was a series of climate-controlled prefab units linked together, equipped with surprisingly sophisticated medical technology. Sarah had been here before, minor injuries, routine checkups, but never as a patient with a gunshot wound. The bullet had passed clean through her shoulder, missing bone and major arteries by what the flight medic had called dumb luck. Though Sarah knew there was nothing lucky about taking a bullet. Lieutenant Brennan, you need to come with me now, said Captain Elena Vasquez, the lead trauma surgeon. She was a small woman with sharp eyes and hands that moved with practiced efficiency. That shoulder needs proper attention before infection sets in. Sarah stood, swaying slightly. The adrenaline that had carried her through the firefight was fading, leaving behind a bone-deep exhaustion and pain that was becoming harder to ignore. She followed Vasquez into the emergency treatment area, where bright fluorescent lights made everything seem harsh and overly real. Sit, Vasquez ordered, pointing to an examination table. Sarah complied, grateful to be off her feet. The doctor began cutting away Sarah's blood-soaked uniform, revealing the entry and exit wounds. Both had been field-dressed by Martinez, but they needed thorough cleaning and proper sutures. You're lucky, Vasquez said, echoing the flight medic's assessment. Another inch to the right, and this would have shattered your clavicle. Another inch inward, and it might have hit your subclavian artery. You have bled out before the medevac could get to you. Doesn't feel lucky, Sarah said through gritted teeth as Vasquez began irrigating the wound. The pain was sharp and immediate, cutting to the fog in her mind. I imagine not, but you'll make a full recovery. 6 to 8 weeks of physical therapy, and you'll be back in fighting shape. Vasquez paused, her eyes meeting Sarah's. What you did out there today, running into fire to save Davidson, that took serious courage, or serious stupidity. Maybe both. Sarah didn't respond. She had stopped trying to explain to people why she did what she did. The truth was simpler than anyone seemed to understand. She had taken an oath to protect the people she served with, regardless of how they treated her. That oath didn't come with exceptions for people who called you names or questioned your right to be there. The door to the treatment area opened, and Staff Sergeant Rodriguez entered, his face etched with concern. How is she, Doc? She'll live. Unlike her shoulder, her judgment might be permanently impaired, but physically she'll be fine. Rodriguez allowed himself a small smile. That's good to hear. He turned to Sarah. Davidson's in surgery now. They think he'll pull through. Multiple shrapnel wounds, concussion, second-degree burns on his left arm and face. But he's alive because of you. Sarah nodded, feeling something tight in her chest loosen slightly. And the rest of the team? Minor injuries. Chun took some shrapnel in the leg. Martinez has a mild concussion from a blast wave. Williams has some burns. But everyone made it back. That's a fucking miracle given how badly that ambush was planned. The intel was bad, Sarah said. It wasn't a question. Rodriguez's face darkened. Yeah, someone fed us bullshit information. Command is investigating, but between you and me, I think we were set up. That ambush was too well coordinated. They knew we were coming. The implications of that were disturbing, but Sarah was too tired to process them fully. Vasquez was finishing the sutures on her shoulder, her hands moving with the kind of precision that spoke of countless similar procedures. "All done," Vasquez announced. "I'm prescribing antibiotics and pain medication. You're grounded from active duty for at least 2 weeks, maybe longer depending on how the healing progresses. And before you argue, that's non-negotiable. You try to do anything strenuous with that shoulder, and you'll tear the sutures. Then we're looking at months of recovery instead of weeks." Sarah opened her mouth to protest, then closed it. She knew Vasquez was right, even if the thought of being sidelined made her skin crawl. "Understood, Captain." "Good. Now get some rest." "That's an order." Rodriguez walked with Sarah back to barracks, matching his shorter stride to her longer one. The base was quiet in the evening, most personnel either at dinner or trying to catch some sleep before their next shift. The air had cooled to a merely oppressive heat, instead of the brutal temperatures of midday. "You know the whole base is talking about what you did, right?" Rodriguez said after a moment of silence. Sarah shrugged with her good shoulder. "They'll forget about it soon enough." "I don't think so. Not this time." Rodriguez stopped walking, forcing Sarah to stop as well. "Look, I know you've dealt with a lot of shit since you got here. Hell, since you joined the SEALs. But what you did today, that changes things. You proved something out there." "I shouldn't have had to prove anything," Sarah said, and there was an edge to her voice that surprised even her. "I passed the same training as everyone else, met the same standards, scored higher than most of them on marksmanship, hand-to-hand combat, tactical planning. But because I'm a woman who doesn't fit their narrow definition of what a woman should look like, I have to constantly prove I belong. And even when I do, there's always someone waiting to find a reason to doubt me again." Rodriguez was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You're right. You shouldn't have to prove yourself. The fact that you do is a failure on our part, not yours. But for what it's worth, after today, anyone who questions your abilities is a damn fool." Sarah wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that one act of courage, one moment of selflessness, would somehow erase years of casual cruelty and institutional skepticism. But she had been disappointed too many times to allow herself that hope. They reached the female barracks, a smaller building set apart from the main structures, housing a handful of women stationed at the base. Sarah said goodnight to Rodriguez and went inside, grateful for the relative privacy and quiet. Lance Corporal Martinez was there, sitting on her bunk with an ice pack pressed to her head. She looked up when Sarah entered, her face breaking into a genuine smile, despite the obvious pain she was in. "There's the hero of the hour," Martinez said. "How's the shoulder?" "Painful." "How's the head?" "Like someone used it as a drum. But I'll live." Martinez's expression grew more serious. "Sarah, what you did out there, I just want you to know that not everyone here has been blind to who you are. Some of us have always known you were the real deal." Sarah sat down on her own bunk, careful not to jar her shoulder. "Thanks, Amy. That means a lot." "I mean it, and I'm not the only one. You got more people in your corner than you think." Martinez hesitated, then added, "Davidson woke up for a minute before they took him into surgery. You know what he said?" Sarah shook her head. He said, "The giant saved me. Atlas saved my life." He was crying. Sarah, that hard-ass Marine who's been giving you shit for months was crying, because you risked your life for him even after everything he said about you. Sarah felt something twist in her chest. Not quite forgiveness, but perhaps the beginning of understanding. People were complicated. They could be cruel and grateful, prejudiced and capable of growth, all at the same time. "He's still an asshole," Sarah said, but there was no real heat in her words. Martinez laughed, then winced and pressed the ice pack more firmly against her head. "Yeah, but maybe he'll be a slightly less terrible asshole from now on." The next morning, Sarah woke to find that her reputation had undergone a seismic shift overnight. As she made her way to the mess hall for breakfast, moving slowly because her shoulder was stiff and painful despite the medication, she noticed people looking at her differently. There were still stares, but they weren't the mocking or skeptical glances she had grown accustomed to. These were looks of respect, even admiration. A group of Marines stood as she passed their table, a gesture of respect usually reserved for high-ranking officers. One of them, a young private she didn't recognize, actually saluted her. "Thank you for what you did yesterday, ma'am," he said. "Corporal Davidson is my squad leader. You brought him home." Sarah nodded, uncomfortable with the attention, but recognizing the sincerity behind it. "Just doing my job, private." She got her breakfast, scrambled eggs, toast, and coffee that tasted like it had been brewed from dirt and regret, and found a table in her usual corner. But this time, she wasn't alone for long. Chin approached hesitantly, his breakfast tray in hand. "Mind if I sit here, Lieutenant?" Sarah gestured to the empty seat across from her. Chin sat down, and for a moment neither of them spoke. The silence was awkward, but not hostile. Finally, Chin said, "I've been thinking about what to say to you since yesterday, trying to find the right words. But there aren't right words for this, are there? I was wrong about you. We were all wrong. And I'm sorry." Sarah looked at him, really looked at him. He was young, maybe 23, with the kind of face that still held traces of boyhood. He had probably grown up in a world where certain assumptions about gender and strength and capability were never questioned. And now those assumptions have been shattered in the most dramatic way possible. "Apology accepted," Sarah said simply. Just like that. "What do you want me to do, Chin? Hold a grudge? Make you grovel? I'm tired. I've been fighting my whole life. Fighting to prove I'm strong enough, smart enough, tough enough. I don't have the energy to fight with people who are willing to see the truth." Chin nodded slowly. "For what it's worth, I told Davidson what I thought of things he said about you. When he wakes up properly, he's going to know that too. He already knows. He was there when I pulled him out of that burning Humvee." Other people began joining them at the table. Martinez, Williams, even Rodriguez. It was unprecedented. Sarah had eaten alone for so long that having people actively choose to sit with her felt surreal. Rodriguez set down his tray and said, "Command wants to see you after breakfast. Captain Morrison specifically." Sarah's stomach tightened. Did he say why? No, but I imagine it has something to do with yesterday's clusterfuck. Don't worry, you're not in trouble. If anything, I wouldn't be surprised if they're talking about a commendation. The thought of a commendation made Sarah deeply uncomfortable. She hadn't run into that burning vehicle for recognition or glory. She had done it because it was the right thing to do, the only thing to do. The idea of turning that moment into some kind of ceremony felt wrong. But orders were orders. After breakfast, Sarah made her way to the command building, her shoulder aching with each step. The building was one of the few permanent structures on the base, made of reinforced concrete and designed to withstand mortar attacks. Captain Morrison's office was Spartan, a desk, a few chairs, an American flag on a stand in the corner. Morrison himself was a career officer in his mid-40s, with gray streaking through his close-cropped hair and the kind of weathered face that came from multiple combat deployments. "Lieutenant Brennan, have a seat," Morrison said, gesturing to one of the chairs. His tone was neutral, impossible to read. Sarah sat, her back straight despite the pain in her shoulder. Morrison studied her for a moment before speaking. "I've read Staff Sergeant Rodriguez's after-action report. I've also spoken with the other members of Bravo team. What you did yesterday was extraordinary. I was just doing my job, sir." "No, Lieutenant, you went above and beyond your job. You risked your life in a way that most people wouldn't have, to save a man who, by all accounts, has treated you with disrespect and mockery since you arrived at this base." Sarah didn't respond. There was nothing to say. Morrison continued, "I'm recommending you for the Bronze Star with Valor. Your actions exemplify the highest traditions of military service." "That's not necessary, sir. I don't need a medal." "It's not about what you need, Lieutenant. It's about recognizing exceptional courage and setting an example. Whether you like it or not, you become a symbol. There are a lot of people watching how women perform in combat roles, and what you did yesterday sends a powerful message." Sarah felt a familiar frustration building. "With respect, sir, I didn't join the SEALs to be a symbol. I joined to serve my country. I understand that, but sometimes we don't get to choose what we represent." Morrison's expression softened slightly. "Look, I know this hasn't been easy for you. I know there's been resistance, skepticism, even outright hostility. Some of that is changing, thanks to yesterday, but there will always be people who question whether women belong in combat roles. Your success or failure will be used to judge every woman who comes after you. That's not fair, but it's reality. Sarah met his eyes. So what are you saying, sir? That I have to be perfect? That one mistake will be used to discredit every woman in the military. I'm saying you need to be aware of the larger implications of your service. But more importantly, I'm saying that you've proven yourself. You've earned the respect of your fellow operators. Don't let anyone, including yourself, diminish what you've accomplished. The conversation ended shortly after, and Sarah walked out of Morrison's office feeling unsettled. She understood what he was saying, even agreed with parts of it, but the weight of representation was exhausting. Why should her actions be seen as a referendum on all women? Why couldn't she just be a soldier who did something brave, without it becoming a political statement? The rest of the day passed in a blur of medical checkups, mandatory rest, and more awkward conversations with people who suddenly wanted to express their admiration. By evening, Sarah was exhausted, not just physically, but emotionally. She returned to the barracks to find a handwritten note on her bunk. The handwriting was shaky, as if written by someone still recovering from injury. It read, "Lieutenant Brennan, they tell me I'm going to make a full recovery. The doctors say if you had waited even 30 more seconds, I would have died from blood loss or when the fuel tank exploded. You saved my life. I don't know how to apologize for things I've said about you. I don't know if I can ever make up for being such an asshole. But I want you to know that I will spend the rest of my career making sure people know the truth about you, that you're the bravest, strongest, most selfless operator I've ever served with. Thank you for not giving up on me, even when I didn't deserve your help. Corporal Jake Davidson." Sarah read the note twice, then carefully folded it and put it in her footlocker. She wouldn't keep it for sentimental reasons. Sentiment had no place in a war zone. But she would keep it as a reminder that people could change, that courage could bridge divides, that sometimes the hardest battles were the ones you fought to simply be seen as human. That night, she slept better than she had in months. 2 weeks passed before Sarah was cleared for light duty. Her shoulder had healed well, faster than Dr. Vasquez had predicted, thanks to Sarah's exceptional physical conditioning and disciplined approach to recovery. The physical therapy had been brutal, but Sarah had attacked it with the same intensity she brought to everything else in her life. By the end of the second week, she could perform most standard movements without significant pain, though heavy lifting and weapons handling were still restricted. The base had changed in subtle but undeniable ways during her recovery. The whispers and mocking comments that had once followed her everywhere had largely disappeared, replaced by a new kind of attention that Sarah found equally uncomfortable. Now people wanted to talk to her, to be associated with her, to hear the story of the rescue from her own lips. She deflected these attempts at connection as politely as she could, but it was exhausting. Corporal Davidson had been medically evacuated to a hospital in Germany for additional treatment and skin grafts for his burns. Before he left, he had asked to see Sarah. She had visited him in the hospital ward, where he lay bandaged and pale but alive. "I wanted to thank you again," he had said, his voice rough from smoke inhalation, "and to apologize properly, not just in a note. I was a complete asshole to you, Lieutenant. There's no excuse for it." Sarah had stood at his bedside, arms crossed, her expression neutral. "You were following the crowd. It's easier to mock someone than to challenge your own assumptions. That doesn't make it right." "No, it doesn't. But you're acknowledging it now. That counts for something." Davidson had looked away, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "I keep thinking about how you didn't hesitate. The Humvee was on fire, bullets were flying everywhere, and you just ran straight into it. For me, after everything I said, everything I did, you're my teammate," Sarah had said simply. "That's all that matters." Now, as Sarah walked across the base toward the training grounds for her first day back on light duty, she thought about that conversation. Davidson's transformation from antagonist to ally had been dramatic, but she wondered how deep it really went. Would he remember this lesson when he was back with his squad, surrounded by other Marines who still harbored doubts about women in combat? Or would the social pressure pull him back toward his old attitudes. The training grounds were a sprawling complex of shooting ranges, obstacle courses, and tactical training facilities. Sarah had been assigned to work with the base's newest arrivals, a group of young soldiers fresh from advanced training who were being integrated into various units. Her job was to help evaluate their skills and provide mentorship. She found the group assembled near the main obstacle course. 12 soldiers, men and women, all looking nervous and eager in equal measure. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez was already there, clipboard in hand, looking as unflappable as ever. "Lieutenant Brennan, good to see you back on your feet," Rodriguez said. "How's the shoulder?" "Functional. I won't be doing any pull-ups for another couple weeks, but I can demonstrate most of the standard drills." "Good enough. These are our newest additions to FOB Sentinel. They've all completed their advanced training, but they need real-world orientation before they're assigned to active units." He turned to the assembled group. "This is Lieutenant Sarah Brennan, Navy SEAL. 2 weeks ago, she saved a Marine's life by carrying him out of a burning vehicle while under heavy enemy fire. If you pay attention to what she teaches you, you might just survive your first real engagement." Sarah noticed the way the young soldiers looked at her, with respect, yes, but also with something else. Hope, maybe, or recognition. Among the 12, 4 were women, including one who stood nearly as tall as Sarah herself. "I'm not here to give you a pep talk," Sarah began, her voice carrying across the training ground. "I'm here to help prepare you for combat. War doesn't care about your gender, your background, or your feelings. It only cares about whether you're competent, whether you can trust your training, and whether you can trust the people beside you." She spent the next several hours putting the group through their paces, tactical movement drills, weapons handling, cover and concealment exercises. Sarah watched carefully, noting strengths and weaknesses, offering corrections when needed, but mostly letting them learn through doing. During a water break, one of the female soldiers, a lanky private named Jessica Torres, approached Sarah hesitantly. "Lieutenant Brennan, can I ask you something?" Sarah nodded, taking a long drink from her canteen. The afternoon sun was brutal, and she could feel sweat soaking through her uniform. "What's it like?" Torres asked. "Being one of the only women in special operations? Does it ever get easier?" Sarah considered the question carefully. Torres was young, probably 21 or 22, with the kind of earnest intensity that reminded Sarah of herself at that age. "Easier? No," Sarah said honestly. "But you get stronger. You develop thicker skin. You learn to let the doubt and the mockery roll off you because you know your own worth." She paused. "But I won't lie to you, Torres. It's hard. You'll face skepticism at every turn. You'll have to prove yourself over and over again, even after you've already proven yourself. You'll be held to higher standards and given less credit when you meet them." Torres's face fell slightly. "That doesn't sound very encouraging." "I'm not here to encourage you with comfortable lies. I'm here to tell you the truth. Yes, it's hard, but it's also worth it, if this is really what you want. If you're willing to fight for your place, to refuse to accept anyone's definition of what you can or can't do, then you can make it. I did, and so can you." Something shifted in Torres's expression, doubt giving way to determination. "Thank you, ma'am. That's exactly what I needed to hear." As Torres jogged back to her position, Rodriguez appeared beside Sarah. "You're good with them. The new ones. They need someone like you to look up to. I'm not trying to be anyone's role model. Maybe not, but you are one anyway. Whether you like it or not, Sarah, you've changed things here. People are talking differently about women in combat. They're rethinking their assumptions." Sarah wanted to argue, but she could see the evidence around her. The way the male soldiers in the training group treated their female counterparts with more respect than she had seen when she first arrived. The way conversations in the mess hall had shifted, with fewer casual sexist jokes and more serious discussions about capabilities and readiness. That evening, Sarah was summoned to another meeting with Captain Morrison. This time, Colonel Patricia Hayes was also present, the highest-ranking officer on the base and someone Sarah had rarely interacted with directly. Hayes was a formidable woman in her late 50s, with steel gray hair and a reputation as a brilliant strategist who had risen through the ranks during a time when even fewer opportunities existed for women in the military. "Lieutenant Brennan, thank you for coming," Hayes said, gesturing for Sarah to sit. "I wanted to speak with you personally about several matters. First, your Bronze Star recommendation has been approved. The ceremony will be held next week." Sarah nodded, accepting this news without comment. Hayes continued, "Second, I've been reviewing the personnel reports from FOB Sentinel, particularly regarding unit cohesion and performance. Your presence here has had a measurable impact, not just through your own actions, but through the example you've set. Morale among female personnel has improved significantly. Reports of sexual harassment are down. And perhaps most importantly, several male soldiers have specifically requested assignments to units you're associated with." This surprised Sarah. "Sir, I'm not sure I understand the significance." "The significance, Lieutenant, is that you've proven something that shouldn't have needed proving but did nonetheless. That a woman can excel in special operations. That gender is irrelevant to combat effectiveness. That courage has no chromosomes." Hayes leaned forward. "I'm authorizing expansion of female integration into special operations units. You'll be part of that expansion, training new operators, developing protocols, serving as a liaison between command and the women entering these roles." Sarah felt a complex mix of emotions. Pride, certainly, but also frustration. "With respect, Colonel, I didn't join the SEALs to become a diversity officer. And you won't be. You'll continue your primary duties as an operator, but you'll also take on this additional responsibility because you're uniquely qualified for it. You've walked the path these new operators will be walking. You've faced the challenges they'll face. Who better to guide them?" Sarah couldn't argue with the logic, even if she chafed against the implication that her gender defined her role. "Understood, Colonel. I'll do whatever is asked of me." "I know you will. That's why you're the right person for this." Hayes' expression softened slightly. "I know this isn't what you signed up for, Lieutenant. I know you just want to do your job without all the extra baggage. But sometimes history chooses us. We don't get to decide when or how we become important. We only get to decide how we respond." After the meeting, Sarah walked back to the barracks through the gathering darkness. The base was settling into its evening routine. Soldiers heading to dinner, shifts changing at the guard posts, the distant sound of helicopters on patrol. Martinez was in their shared quarters, lying on her bunk and reading a worn paperback novel. She looked up when Sarah entered. "You look like you just got volunteered for something you want to do," Martinez observed. "That obvious? Your face is an open book when you're pissed off. What happened?" Sarah sat down on her own bunk and explained the conversation with Colonel Hayes. Martinez listened without interrupting, then set her book aside. "So you're going to be training the next generation of female special operators. That's huge, Sarah. It's a distraction from actual combat operations. I didn't train my entire adult life to become a mentor and a symbol. Maybe not, but maybe it's more important than you think." Martinez swung her legs over the side of her bunk, facing Sarah directly. "You know how many girls are going to hear about what you did? How many young women are going to see that a woman saved a Marine's life under fire and think, maybe I could do that too? You're opening doors that have been locked for generations. I just want to be a SEAL, not a trailblazer, not a symbol, just a soldier doing her job. I get it. I really do. But you don't get to choose your impact on the world. You only get to choose your actions. And your actions have inspired people, including me, if I'm being honest." Sarah looked at her friend, surprised. "You? Yeah. You think I haven't noticed the way you handle the bullshit? The way you refuse to shrink yourself to make other people comfortable? I've been in the military for 8 years, and I've spent most of that time trying to be invisible, trying not cause problems, trying to prove I'm one of the guys. But you never apologize for taking up space. And watching you has made me realize I don't need to apologize either." Sarah didn't know what to say to that. She had been so focused on her own struggles, her own fight for acceptance, that she hadn't considered how her journey might be affecting others. "I'm not as brave as you think," Sarah finally said. "Bullshit. You're exactly as brave as I think. You just don't see it because you're too busy being modest." The conversation was interrupted by a knock on the door. Private Torres stood in the doorway, looking nervous. "Sorry to interrupt, Lieutenant, but there's someone here to see you. Says it's important." Sarah followed Torres to the common area, where a man in civilian clothes was waiting. He was in his late 30s, wearing khakis and a polo shirt that seemed absurdly casual in the military environment. He stood when Sarah entered. "Lieutenant Brennan, my name is Marcus Webb. I'm a journalist with the Washington Post. I'd like to talk to you about what happened 2 weeks ago." Sarah's first instinct was to refuse. She had no interest in talking to the media, no desire to have her story sensationalized or used for political purposes. But before she could say anything, Webb continued. "I understand if you don't want to talk, but I think your story needs to be told, not as propaganda and not as a puff piece, but as an honest look at what women in combat actually face. The challenges, the prejudice, and yes, the extraordinary acts of courage." "I'm not authorized to speak to the press without approval from my command," Sarah said, which was true, but also a convenient excuse. "I've already cleared it with Colonel Hayes. She thinks it would be beneficial for the broader conversation about women in special operations." Of course she did. Sarah felt trapped by circumstances beyond her control, by expectations, by symbolism, by the weight of representation that Captain Morrison had warned her about. "Fine," Sarah said, more curtly than she intended. "But I'm not doing this to make myself look good. I did my job. That's the story." Webb smiled. "That's exactly the story I want to tell." They sat in a quiet corner of the common area, and Webb pulled out a small recorder. "Tell me about that day. What was going through your mind when you saw Corporal Davidson trapped in the burning vehicle?" Sarah thought back to that moment. The heat, the smoke, the sound of enemy fire. "I wasn't thinking about being heroic or brave. I was thinking that my teammate was going to die if someone didn't act immediately. So I acted. But you were wounded. You took a bullet while carrying him to safety." "Yes." "And you kept going." "Yes." "Why?" Sarah met Webb's eyes. "Because stopping would have meant both of us dying. Because I made a commitment when I became a SEAL to never leave a teammate behind. Because it was the right thing to do. I don't know how to explain it better than that." Webb nodded, making notes. "Tell me about your experience in the SEALs. Has it been difficult being one of the few women in special operations?" "Yes." "Can you elaborate?" Sarah hesitated. This was dangerous territory. She didn't want to come across as whining or playing the victim. But she also felt a responsibility to be honest, for the sake of the women who would come after her. "I faced skepticism from the moment I entered training," she said carefully. "People doubted I could meet the physical standards. When I met them, they questioned whether the standards had been lowered for me. When I proved they hadn't been, they found other reasons to doubt my height, my build, my personality. Some of it was explicit. A lot of it was subtle, but it was constant. And how did you deal with that?" "I kept proving myself, over and over again. I outperformed my peers on marksmanship tests, on tactical exercises, on physical fitness assessments. I thought that if I was good enough, if I was undeniably competent, people would have to accept me. But they didn't. Not all of them. Not until I literally ran into a burning vehicle to save someone's life. And even then, I'm not sure some people will ever truly accept that a woman belongs in special operations." Webb was quiet for a moment, then asked, "Do you think what you did, saving Corporal Davidson, will change perceptions about women in combat?" "I hope so. But I'm realistic enough to know that one incident doesn't erase years of institutional bias. There will always be people who see me as an exception, not as evidence of what women are capable of." The interview continued for another hour, covering Sarah's background, her motivations for joining the military, her thoughts on the future of women in special operations. By the end, Sarah felt emotionally drained. Talking about her experiences required reliving them, and reliving them meant confronting all the anger and hurt and frustration she usually kept locked away. After Webb left, Sarah sat alone in the common area, watching the night settle over the base. Through the windows, she could see soldiers going about their routines, some heading to gym for evening workouts, others gathering in small groups to talk and decompress. Rodriguez found her there an hour later. He sat down beside her without speaking, and they watched the base together in companionable silence. Finally, Rodriguez said, "You did good today with the new operators, with the journalist. You're handling all of this with a lot of grace. I don't feel graceful. I feel like I'm being pulled in a dozen different directions. Operator, mentor, symbol, spokeswoman. I just want to do my job." "I know, but your job has changed whether you like it or not. You're not just a SEAL anymore. You're a pioneer. And pioneers don't get to control their legacy. They only get to live it." Sarah turned to look at him. "Do you ever regret it? Your career? The sacrifices?" Rodriguez considered the question. "Sometimes. I've missed birthdays, anniversaries, holidays. I've seen things I can't unsee, done things I can't undo. But I've also been part of something bigger than myself. I protected people, saved lives, served my country. Would I trade the hard parts to avoid the good parts? No, I don't think I would." "That's how I feel too," Sarah admitted. "Even with all the bullshit, I can't imagine doing anything else." "Then you got your answer. Keep doing what you're doing. Keep being who you are. Let the rest sort itself out." They sat together a while longer, two soldiers finding peace in each other's company, before the demands of duty called them back to their separate responsibilities. As Sarah walked back to her quarters, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Not the naive hope of youth, but the tempered hope of someone who had faced darkness and chosen to keep moving forward anyway. Maybe she couldn't control how people saw her. Maybe she would always carry the weight of representation. But she could control her actions, her choices, her commitment to being the best operator she could be. And in the end, maybe that was enough. 3 months after the incident that had changed everything, Sarah stood at the edge of a different kind of battlefield. The training facility at Naval Special Warfare Command in Coronado, California, was a world away from the dust and danger of Afghanistan. Here, under the bright California sun, she was helping to train the next generation of female special operators, women who would face the same challenges she had, but who would hopefully find a slightly easier path because of the doors she had helped open. The Bronze Star ceremony had been held a month after she had been wounded, a formal affair with Colonel Hayes presiding and most of the FOB Sentinel in attendance. Sarah had stood at attention while the citation was read, describing her actions in language that made them sound more heroic than they had felt in the moment. When Hayes had pinned the medal to her uniform, Sarah had searched the crowd for familiar faces. Rodriguez, Martinez, even Davidson, who had returned to duty with scars that would last a lifetime, but renewed respect for the woman who had saved him. The Washington Post article had run 2 weeks later, and its impact had been immediate and overwhelming. Webb had written a thoughtful, nuanced piece that captured both Sarah's achievements and the systemic challenges she had faced. The headline read, "The Giant, How One SEAL Proved That Courage Is No Gender." Within days, Sarah's story had been picked up by major news networks, shared across social media, and discussed in military policy circles. The attention had been uncomfortable, sometimes invasive. Sarah had done a handful of carefully controlled interviews, always emphasizing that she was one of many women serving with distinction in combat roles. She had refused to become the kind of celebrity soldier who traded on their service, but she had also recognized the opportunity to shift the conversation about women in the military. Now, standing before a class of 12 female candidates who were attempting to qualify for the SEAL training pipeline, Sarah saw the fruits of that shift. These women were here because people like Sarah had proven it was possible. They were here because the military had finally committed to giving women a fair chance in special operations. They were here because courage, it turned out, really didn't have a gender. "Welcome to day one," Sarah began, her voice carrying across the sandy training ground. "Some of you know who I am. Some of you might have read the articles or seen the interviews. Forget all of that. Here, I'm just your instructor. And you're just candidates trying to prove you belong in the most elite fighting force in the world." She paced in front of them, her height and physical presence commanding attention without effort. "You're going to face things in this training that will make you want to quit. Pain, exhaustion, doubt, not just from within yourselves, but from the people around you who still don't believe women should be here. Some of you will wash out. There's no shame in that. This training is designed to identify people who have the physical and mental toughness to operate in the most extreme conditions imaginable. Sarah paused, making eye contact with each candidate. But for those of you who make it through, you'll join a brotherhood. And yes, I use that term deliberately, of warriors who will trust you with their lives. You'll become part of something that's larger than any individual, any gender, any identity. You'll become a SEAL. The training that followed was brutal. Sarah put them through Hell Week level exercises, surf torture, log drills, endless runs in soft sand carrying heavy boats over their heads. She watched as some candidates discovered reserves of strength they didn't know they had, while others found their breaking points and made the difficult decision to ring the bell that ended their candidacy. One candidate in particular caught Sarah's attention, a woman named Rachel Kim, who stood 5'6" and had been a collegiate wrestler. Kim was small by SEAL standards, but she attacked every challenge with ferocity that reminded Sarah of herself. During a particularly grueling obstacle course run, Kim fell and twisted her ankle badly. Instead of quitting, she limped through the rest of the course, finishing last but finishing nonetheless. After the training day ended, Sarah found Kim in the medical tent, getting her ankle wrapped. That was either very brave or very stupid, Sarah said. Kim looked up, startled. I wasn't going to quit, ma'am. Not over a twisted ankle. I respect the determination, but you need to be smart about injuries. Push through pain when it matters, but recognize when you're risking permanent damage. You can't serve as a SEAL if you cripple yourself in training. Yes, ma'am. Kim hesitated, then asked, Is it true what they say? That you carried a 200-pound Marine through enemy fire while you were shot? Sarah sighed. She had known these questions would come, but they still made her uncomfortable. It's true, but it wasn't as dramatic as it sounds in the stories. I did what needed to be done. It sounds pretty dramatic to me, and it gives me hope that I can make it through this, even though I'm not 6 feet tall and built like a tank. Sarah almost smiled. Being big helps in some situations. But I've known plenty of smaller operators who were more effective than larger ones because they were faster, more agile, better at thinking on their feet. Physical size matters less than mental toughness. Thank you, ma'am. That helps. As Sarah left the medical tent, she was approached by Commander David Chun, the officer in charge of the training program. Chun was a veteran SEAL with 20 years of service and a reputation as both a demanding instructor and a fair evaluator. Lieutenant Brennan, got a minute? Chun asked. They walked together toward the administrative building, the setting sun painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The Pacific Ocean stretched out to the horizon, endless and beautiful. I want to get your assessment of the current class, Chun said. You've been working with them more closely than anyone else. Who do you think has what it takes? Sarah considered the question carefully. Kim has the heart for it. Her technique needs work, and she'll have to get stronger, but she's got the mental toughness. Candidates Martinez and Johnson are both solid. Good physical conditioning, strong team players. Williams is struggling with the water work, but she's improving. I think she might make it if she can overcome her fear. And the others? Thomas is going to quit. She's already mentally checked out. Rodriguez has the physical capabilities, but lacks discipline. Chun, no relation to you, I assume, is technically proficient, but doesn't work well with others. The rest are marginal. Could go either way. Chun nodded, absorbing this information. Your insights have been valuable, Lieutenant. You have a good eye for potential. I know what to look for because I've been where they are. I remember what it feels like to be constantly evaluated, constantly questioned, constantly having to prove yourself. Do you think it's getting better? For women in special operations? Sarah thought about the question. Yes and no. There's more opportunity now, more acceptance in some quarters, but there's still resistance. Some of it is overt, but a lot of it is subtle. The way people question female candidates more harshly, the way they look for reasons to disqualify rather than reasons to advance. What would you change if you could? I'd make the standards truly objective. No different standards for men and women. Same physical tests, same performance requirements, same evaluations. But I'd also insist on accountability for instructors and evaluators who let personal bias influence their assessments. And I'd create more mentorship opportunities. So women coming into the pipeline have experienced operators to learn from. Chun smiled. You've thought about this a lot. It's hard not to when you've lived it. That evening, Sarah video called her family for the first time in weeks. Her mother answered, her face lighting up with joy and relief. Sarah, oh, honey, it's so good to see you. Are you okay? How's your shoulder? I'm fine, Mom. Shoulder's healed. I'm stateside now, helping with training. Her father's face appeared in the frame, crowding next to her mother. We saw the articles, saw the interviews. We're so proud of you, kiddo. Sarah felt a lump form in her throat. Her parents had always supported her choices, even when they hadn't fully understood them. When she had told them at age 18 that she wanted to join the military, they had been worried but supportive. When she had announced her intention to try out for the SEALs, they had been terrified but trusted her judgment. Thanks, Dad. It's been a lot. We can imagine. You're all over the news. People in town keep stopping us to say they saw our daughter on TV, that she's a hero. I'm not a hero. I just did my job. Her mother's eyes were wet with tears. You saved someone's life. Sarah, you risked yourself to bring someone home to their family. That's the definition of heroism. They talked for another hour, about family news, about Sarah's younger brother who was finishing college, about her parents' retirement plans. Normal, ordinary things that felt surreal against the backdrop of everything Sarah had experienced over the past months. When the call ended, Sarah sat alone in her quarters, feeling the weight of all the expectations resting on her shoulders. She thought about the female candidates she was training, about the women who would come after them, about the slow, difficult process of changing an institution as large and traditional as the military. The knock on her door was unexpected. When Sarah opened it, she found Rachel Kim standing there, still limping slightly on her injured ankle. I'm sorry to bother you, ma'am, but I have a question. Come in. Kim entered hesitantly, looking around the small room. Standard military housing, Spartan and functional. I was wondering, how do you deal with the doubt? Not from other people, but from yourself. Sometimes I lie in my bunk at night and think, what if they're right? What if I'm not strong enough, not tough enough, not good enough? How do you quiet those voices? Sarah gestured for Kim to sit, and she took the chair across from her. I don't quiet them, Sarah admitted. I acknowledge them. I let myself feel the doubt, examine it, understand where it's coming from, and then I choose to act despite the doubt. But how do you know you're making the right choice? You don't. Not always. But you make the best decision you can with the information you have, and you commit to it fully. Doubt is natural. It's your brain's way of assessing risk. But don't let it paralyze you. Use it as information, not as a barrier. Kim nodded slowly. The guys in my last unit used to say I was trying too hard to prove something, that I was overcompensating. Maybe you were. I did the same thing when I first started. I pushed myself harder than anyone else, tried to be perfect at everything, never showed weakness or vulnerability. It took me years to realize that I was letting other people's expectations define my behavior. So what changed? I stopped caring what they thought. Or rather, I started caring more about what I thought of myself than what they thought of me. I decided that if I was going to fail, it would be on my own terms, not because I let their doubt become my doubt. Kim smiled, and some of the tension left her shoulders. Thank you, ma'am. That helps more than you know. After Kim left, Sarah lay on her bunk, staring at the ceiling. She thought about the path that brought her here, all the challenges, all the moments of doubt, all the times she wanted to give up but had chosen to keep going instead. She thought about Davidson, who was still serving, still fighting, still alive because she had refused to let him die. She thought about Rodriguez, Martinez, and the countless others who had become more than just colleagues. They were family, forged in the crucible of shared danger and mutual trust. She thought about the article Webb had written, about the interviews she had done, about the medal that now sat in a box in her footlocker. She thought about what Colonel Hayes had said, that sometimes history chooses us, that we don't get to decide when or how we become important. Most of all, she thought about the women she was training. The women who would come after her, the slow but steady change she could see happening in the military's attitude toward female operators. The change was fragile, easily reversed if people like her failed or gave up. But it was real. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text message. It was from an unknown number, but the message was clear. Lieutenant Brennan, this is Jake Davidson. I'm being reassigned to Coronado next month. Rodriguez told me you're there training new operators. I was hoping we could grab a beer, talk about what happened. I owe you more than a note. I owe you my life, and I want to say thank you properly. Sarah stared at the message for a long moment, then typed out a reply. Beer sounds good. Welcome to California. She set the phone down and closed her eyes, allowing herself a moment of peace. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, more training, more candidates struggling to prove themselves, more opportunities to shape the future of special operations. But tonight, she could rest. The next morning, Sarah woke before dawn, as she always did. She went for a run along the beach, her feet pounding the packed sand near the water's edge, her breath coming in steady rhythms. The ocean stretched out beside her, vast and indifferent, a reminder how small any individual was in the grand scheme of things. But small didn't mean insignificant. One person, acting with courage and conviction, could change the world, or at least their small corner of it. Sarah had learned that lesson the hard way, learned it through pain and struggle and the refusal to accept anyone else's definition of what she could or couldn't do. As the sun rose over the Pacific, painting the sky in brilliant colors, Sarah finished her run and headed back to base. There was training to conduct, candidates to evaluate, a future to help shape. The work was never done, the challenges never fully overcome. But that was okay. Sarah Brennan, Atlas the giant, the SEAL who had carried an injured Marine through fire, was exactly where she needed to be, doing exactly what she was meant to do. And somewhere in Afghanistan or Germany or California or 100 other places, there were women watching her example and thinking, if she can do it, maybe I can too. That thought, more than any medal or article or recognition, made everything worthwhile. Sarah walked into the training facility, where her candidates were already assembling for the day's challenges. Rachel Kim stood at attention, her ankle wrapped but her expression determined. The others flanked her, a diverse group of women united by a common goal, to prove that courage, strength, and excellence had nothing to do with gender and everything to do with heart. Good morning, Sarah said, her voice carrying across the space. Today we're going to push harder than yesterday. We're going to find your limits, and then exceed them. Some of you will want to quit. Don't. Some of you will doubt yourselves. That's normal. But remember why you're here. Remember what you're fighting for. She paused, looking at each face in turn. You're not just fighting for yourselves. You're fighting for every woman who was told she couldn't. You're fighting for every girl who dreams of serving her country at the highest level. You're fighting to prove that there are no limits except the ones we accept. The training began, and Sarah watched as her candidates threw themselves into the challenges before them. They would struggle. They would hurt. Some would fail. But others would succeed, and in their success, they would change the world, just as Sarah had. The giant who had once been mocked as a monster in uniform was now a legend, a mentor, a symbol of what was possible when courage met opportunity. But more than that, she was simply Lieutenant Sarah Brennan, a SEAL, a soldier, a woman who had refused to be anything less than exactly who she was. And that, in the end, was the most powerful thing of all.